Ken, and I'm not sure I'm going to phrase this as eloquently as I'd like, but I think you make the point in your report very succinctly that this idea of this war on terror being the central premise of our foreign policy needs to be replaced. And I think in the current political climate, I want to know what your response is to those that seem to be just beating that drum bill, that it's always, the war on terror, the war on terror. Anybody that focuses on something else is weak on defense, is weak on our security issue. And can you just talk a little bit more about putting into perspective the issue of terror amongst all of the other long-term strategies that we need to deal with in terms of good, solid foreign policy? What would you say to those on both sides of the aisle marching down to the presidential thing, trying to out-tough one another by focusing only on the so-called war on terror and not broadening it out as you recommend?
Well, I'd start with the obvious that a nation as great as ours ought to be able to do two or more things at once. Second, that this single focus on the global war on terror, to a large extent, in my view, is taking our gaze off where our long-term national equities are. For instance, the whole center of gravity of the world is moving to Asia. Whether you look in terms of size of population, size of the military, size of GDPs, everything, it's shifting to Asia. And whether we're able to take advantage of that shift is a real question, because we're spending all our time on the central organizing principle of the war on terror. I'm not arguing, none of us in this commission would argue that terrorism isn't a real and, as I said, a growing threat. But absent WMD, it's not an existential threat. It's not like fascism was in the 30s and 40s. It wasn't like communism was throughout the Cold War. This was a different phenomenon, and we ought to be able to do two things at once.
Thank you.
I agree with that, and I don't think that one should read the Commission recommendation here as saying we should let down our vigilance in the struggle against terrorism. What we've seen over the 20th century is that terrorist movements generally tend to last a generation. We're not done with this. But what we've also seen is that they burn themselves out over time if you don't overreact to them. Terrorism is a little bit like jiu-jitsu. You have a weak player who only defeat a large player by using the strength of the large player against himself. So what we do to ourselves is often more important than what they do to us directly. And that means that we have to be very careful how we react. For example, if we, after a 9/11, cut out visas for foreign students, we're serving their interests, not ours. Terrorism is about theater, about their gaining attention. To the extent in which we give that attention, they gain, not we. If we also think of the fact that the words war on terrorism as a narrative have been interpreted in much of the world as war against Islam, that's clearly not our intent, but that may be the effect, as public opinion polls show. So what we're arguing in the Commission report is not to let down our guard one iota in a struggle, a generation-long struggle against terrorism, but to be more careful in our narrative and presenting to the world a much broader picture, which is what we're recommending in the Commission report, and not just a short-run slogan.
Thank you. I was looking at some of the language in your report. I thought it was well done. Power is the ability to influence the behavior of others to get a desired outcome. Soft power is the ability to attract people to our side without coercion. Legitimacy is central to soft power. And if America's objectives are believed to be legitimate, we're more likely to persuade people to our view. And victory depends on attracting foreign populations to our side and helping them build capable democratic states. And I thought that was a good choice of words, the populations, not foreign governments necessarily. Can you discuss those concepts in the context of the United States' role and what's going on in Pakistan today?
Well, I was asked a similar question earlier at lunch today, Mr. Chairman. It was if we'd have had all these recommendations of smart power in place today, would Pakistan be in position? My answer was, if we had all these recommendations in place, say 1990, we may be in a much better position in Pakistan. The reason I say that is one of the things we're wrestling with now is the fact we've got a gap of about 10 or maybe 12 years of no interaction with Pakistan military officers and no meaningful interaction with government figures. So we've really cut ourselves out of the game for a while. So the people who are going to be sort of pivotal in the next few years in Pakistan, we have no knowledge of. So I would argue that smart power is something that's going to only be can be judged over a significant period of time. It can't solely be judged by opinion polls, how much affection the United States is held in. It's somewhat like Joe Enlai famously responded to when asked, was the French Revolution successful? And he said, it's too soon to tell. That's kind of a smart power. For 1, 2, 3 years, it's going to be too soon to tell.
I guess part of my point was, we have a situation over there now where the middle class, lawyers, judges, business people, or whatever, seem to be on one side of the fence and the military establishment on the other. And I would guess that we have to be real careful about whether or not we side with the people of Pakistan or perceive to be siding with or against them on this. And there's going to be a real delicate use of smart power in that situation.
I think the question of Pakistan is so complicated that you're right. People seem to be on one side in the military, and I would say the elites on the other side with President Musharraf. The question then is, what happens with our involvement in this? Do we actually add to the situation in a positive way by publicly being seen as promoting Mrs. Bhutto? I think opinion polls in Pakistan would say no, we've actually had the reverse phenomenon. We've actually hurt her, so she's seen to some extent as an American girl.
Well, if we supported just her and not supported the democratic process and let it go wherever it goes.
No. And you'll notice our ambassador today made a very graphic point of going with a CBS camera crew to the Electoral Commission to make the point we want elections. Democratic, open, and fair.
Thank you. And we've been after him to make that statement months and months and months ago. Today's as good as any day, I guess. Mr. Platts.